Picture this. You turn 19 years old, and instead of blowing out candles at home, you win your country a penalty in a World Cup semifinal on the very day of your birthday. And while you're doing that, your 3-year-old little brother is stealing the entire internet's heart from a stadium seat, sticking his tongue out at 60,000 people on the big screen. This is the story of Lamine Yamal, the most talked about teenager in football right now, and the tiny co-star who has somehow become just as famous as he is. Let's start with the football, because that's where this story really begins. Lamine Yamal walked into this World Cup as Spain's brightest young talent, a player who broke onto the scene as a teenager at Barcelona and has been rewriting record books ever since. But heading into the semi-final against France, he still only had one goal to his name in the entire tournament. People were waiting for his big moment. They were waiting for him to do something that matched the hype. And then, on July 14th in Dallas, on the day before his actual 19th birthday, he delivered. In the 22nd minute against France, Yamal drove into the box with the ball, dropped his shoulder, and drew a foul from French defender Lucas Digne. The referee didn't hesitate.
Penalty to Spain.
Mikel Oyarzabal stepped up, sent the goalkeeper the wrong way, and Spain were 1-0 up in a game that would end 2-0, sending them into the World Cup final. Yamal didn't score himself, but he won it, on the eve of his birthday, against the tournament's most dangerous attacking team. That's the kind of storyline that writes its own highlight reel. But here's the thing that made this moment even bigger online. It wasn't just about Yamal anymore. It was about his little brother. Kane is 3 years old. He's Lamine Yamal's baby brother, and over the course of this World Cup, he has become one of the most talked about people at the entire tournament, without kicking a single ball. Every time the broadcast cameras find him in the stands, something magical happens. He's not sitting still, he's not politely clapping, he's living his absolute best life. 3 years old, in a stadium packed with tens of thousands of people, completely unbothered by the scale of the moment. The clip that really sent him viral happened during one of Spain's matches, when the stadium's giant screen landed on him. Instead of freezing up or waving shyly the way most toddlers would, Kane looked straight into that camera and stuck his tongue out at the entire crowd. It was pure, unfiltered, 3-year-old chaos, and it was hilarious. And the moment didn't stop there. Because up on the pitch, Lamine Yamal, arguably the most scrutinized young footballer on the planet, saw his brother's antics on the big screen and just started laughing. Mid-match, mid-tournament pressure, and his brother still managed to crack him up. Think about the contrast for a second. Here is Yamal, carrying the weight of being Spain's next-generation superstar, dealing with penalty shootouts, marking assignments, media scrutiny, comparisons to the greatest players of his generation. And then there's Kane, who has zero responsibilities except being adorable and occasionally sticking his tongue out at strangers. The internet ate it up immediately. Clips of Kane's stadium moments started circulating everywhere. Fans started posting side-by-sides of Big Brother scoring or winning penalties and Little Brother cheering or making faces in the stands, and the pairing became its own mini-viral phenomenon within the bigger World Cup story. This is honestly one of those storylines that captures something bigger than football itself. World Cups are usually remembered for the goals, the trophies, the controversies. But some of the most shared, most rewatched moments end up being the human ones, the side stories that remind you these are real families, not just players on a scoreboard. Kane didn't do anything except be a normal 3-year-old in an abnormal setting, and that contrast is exactly why it worked so well online. And it's not just casual fans talking about it either. Sports outlets covering the tournament have specifically flagged Kane as one of the breakout personalities of this World Cup, which is a wild sentence to write about a toddler, but here we are. He's sitting in the same sentence as Golden Boot contenders and World Cup finalists, purely because of a few seconds of unscripted, camera-caught joy. Let's zoom out for a second, because the Yamal family story doesn't start at this World Cup. Lamine Yamal has been under the microscope since he was practically a child himself, debuting for Barcelona at 15 and becoming one of the youngest players in the club's history to make a senior appearance. By the time he was a regular starter for both Barcelona and the Spanish national team, he was already being talked about in the same breath as some of the greatest players to ever come through La Masia, Barcelona's famous academy. That's an enormous amount of pressure to carry before you're even old enough to legally rent a car in most countries. So when people talk about Yamal laughing at his brother mid-tournament, it's not just a cute clip, it's a glimpse of a 19-year-old who, despite everything riding on his shoulders, still gets to be a normal big brother for a few seconds. That's part of why fans connected with it so strongly. It humanized a player who spends most of his time being talked about in terms of stats, market value, and comparisons to legends. Meanwhile, the tournament around him has been building toward exactly this kind of moment. Spain came into the semi-final against France with one of the most disciplined defensive records of the entire competition, having conceded just a single goal across their first 6 matches. France, on the other hand, arrived with arguably the most explosive attacking line in the tournament, headlined by Kylian Mbappé chasing the Golden Boot. So when Yamal won that penalty in the 22nd minute, it wasn't just a random moment in a random game. It was young talent breaking through against one of the most feared attacking sides in the world, on the biggest stage football has to offer. Now here's where the story ties back together beautifully. On the same day that his little brother's antics were circulating online, Yamal turned in the exact kind of performance Spain needed. He set up the moment that got Spain their crucial penalty, doing it the day before his own 19th birthday, against a France side loaded with Mbappé, Dembélé, and Ollis. Spain went on to win 2-0 and book their spot in the World Cup final, their first final appearance since they won it all back in 2010. So by the end of that day, you had 2 Yamal storylines trending at the same time. One was a 19-year-old delivering on the sport's biggest stage, on his birthday, helping send his country to a World Cup final. The other was his 3-year-old brother going viral for sticking his tongue out at a stadium full of people. Different generations, completely different kinds of fame, but both impossible to look away from. What makes this whole thing so shareable is that it has layers for basically every kind of audience. If you're a hardcore football fan, you've got the tactical story, a 19-year-old winning a decisive penalty in a semi-final on his birthday. If you're someone who barely follows football but loves a wholesome viral clip, you've got Kane stealing the show from the stands. And if you're into the bigger picture, you've got this heartwarming family angle, a superstar in the making who still cracks up watching his little brother be a goofball in the middle of the most important match of his career. Spain now moves on to the World Cup final on July 19th at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, where they'll face either Argentina or England, depending on how that semi-final plays out. And you can bet that if Yamal takes the field in that final, the cameras covering the crowd are going to be searching for one very specific 3-year-old face, ready to catch whatever chaos he brings next. There's also something worth noting about how quickly these moments travel now compared to World Cups even just a few years ago. A 3-year-old sticking his tongue out on a stadium screen used to be the kind of thing that maybe made a local broadcast blooper reel. Now, within hours, it's clipped, captioned, translated, and shared across every platform, sitting right alongside professional match highlights in people's feeds. Kane didn't need a highlight package or a press conference. He needed about 4 seconds of camera time, and the internet did the rest. That's part of what makes this such a good case study if you're thinking about making content around this World Cup. The biggest viral moments aren't always the goals. Sometimes they're the 4-second human clips nobody planned for. So that's the story of Lamine Yamal's viral World Cup moment, a birthday penalty win on the pitch, and a scene-stealing toddler brother in the stands, 2 completely different kinds of magic happening on the exact same night. If you enjoyed this one, stick around, because there is a lot more happening off the pitch at this World Cup that's just as wild as what's happening on it. See you in the next video.